Welcome everyone. This is Avery. He went to Ithaca. He studied film. And then I had him in classes before he graduated in 2018. And then he went into visual effects. And he is working at Framestore in New York, but he is physically in Los Angeles, working remotely. And I think probably half the people at your company are remote and half are in person, or?
I would say everyone is remote for the most part. They're going to start going back in person, but not everyone wants to go back, so it's pretty messy. But for the most part, it's remote. So
yeah. So Avery's here to tell you about his experience so far, and there's a few other people here who are out in the industry who can kind of add their experience from what they have been doing. So I will pass it over to Avery, but feel free to ask questions throughout. He's got a presentation, but it can be very conversational.
okay, I'm going to share my screen now. Let's hope that works. It looks like it did. Cool. So hi, as Shana said, I'm Avery. Today we're going to talk a little bit about internships and also just starting your career, like a first entry-level job, as well as internships, because they're pretty similar and a lot of the same ideas apply. So getting the most out of the internship, tips and tricks for starting your career in a remote post-apocalyptic setting, because starting your job now versus when I started my job is strangely different in a lot of ways than it was before, just because the workplace is entirely different. Also, I'm not a graphic designer. This is not going to be the most beautiful PowerPoint you ever see, and that's not the point. So we're going to move right on ahead. Also, part of the reason I'm doing this is because Framestore is actively recruiting interns in all departments. I really like working there. I wouldn't be here telling you about it if I didn't really like it. So I highly recommend applying. If you have any questions about it at the end, definitely ask a question or email me afterwards, find me on LinkedIn, any kind of way that I can help you with that process. I'm more than happy to, because it was a really great experience for me personally. And I really can't recommend it enough. So here's the quick plug for it. Framestore Launchpad Internship Program. It's a hybrid program in New York, LA, or Chicago, meaning most of the time you'll be remote, but there's a chance as sort of the months go on that you may be expected to go in person. So we're looking for interns in all departments. As I said, it's paid. Not all internships are, so that's pretty cool. I don't think I can say too much about how well it's paid. It's an internship. It's not amazing, but it's money. So that's better than most. And you'll get the chance to work on big name projects with big name clients. They really do trust you as an intern to be more of an entry-level worker, and you're going to get to work on projects, not just observe or shadow. It's a real job, which is really nice. In London, this is considered an apprenticeship, not an internship. It's the same program. So think of it more as an apprenticeship than an internship. Applications are due pretty soon. So definitely, if you're interested, get on that. And it'll be a 6-month program most of the summer. It's really good for people who have graduated or recently graduated or are going to graduate. You can still apply if you're a student. I definitely would still encourage you. The kicker is that it would go through November. It's pretty flexible, or it can be. So still apply. If you're worried about the timeline, you might be able to make something work. It's totally worth shooting your shot either way. But don't quote me on that, because I don't really know. Also, don't worry. If you don't really like VFX, this is going to be for all disciplines within post. Most of this information translates across to things like editing or sound or graphic design. All this kind of works in the same realm. It's all just ideas and principles. Other places I've interned as a student were Brainstorm Digital, Titmouse, Fox Sports, kind of Light Iron, but we don't need to talk about that. So if you have any questions about any of these companies, Also, let me know, like I still know some people at most of them, and I'm happy to like connect you or talk about them or any sort of thing. So before we start, ask questions along the way. PowerPoint makes this seem really formal. It's definitely not. Definitely chime up. I don't really have a great way of seeing chat as I go, so I will try my best. Oh, thanks for calling out the Nuke Junior. That was really cool. Mike Villani made that. Yeah, definitely ask questions. Bother me if I didn't notice your question. The PowerPoint's pretty slapped together, so don't judge it too hard. Definitely say funny things throughout. I like that. I try to contribute to that when I'm not presenting, which is 99% of the time. So that's cool too. If you're a professional and you're working in any of these fields or any adjacent field and something seems relevant, like advice, totally shout out, like do a comment. You could even like just speak up and just say like, oh, hey, by the way, this reminded me of this thing, which was really cool, or very relevant and like helped me. So totally make it as conversational as you would like it to be. So about me, I graduated in Ithaca in 2018. This is an awful photo of Shayna, myself, and several other people in Park Post at the time. My old college fashion choices indicate my current character growth. I say that I wrote that when I wasn't wearing a white t-shirt, so that joke doesn't really land quite as well. But I graduated from Ithaca. I did the Launchpad program in 2019 for Framestore. And hopefully all the other stuff that we talk about will sort of gear you up for similar sorts of experiences after you graduate. At Framestore, I've gotten to work on projects like His Dark Materials, Dexter. I worked on one episode, but I just like to say that I worked on Dexter because I like the show. WandaVision, Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, and other things as well, which has been very fun, and it's been a really great experience, and it's been an absolute dream. I really, really love my job. Part one, catering college experience towards future work experience. So a lot of people will sort of graduate and feel like they didn't have a lot of power over, setting themselves up for jobs. But a lot of that is in your hands in the way that you, in the classes that you choose to take, but also in the projects that you choose to make. So make a thesis that helps sell you after you graduate. Most of the people that I graduated with just kind of made a thesis willy-nilly, which is great, or they made something that was very personal to them, which is also great. But they graduated and they didn't really have a direction or a way to sell themselves. And they had like a 15-minute movie that had shoddy sound and this and that. And it just doesn't really do much for you professionally. So art films are cool. Having a job is arguably cooler. You can definitely try both. I would prefer the job personally. But what you can do is try to write your thesis film around whatever skill set that you want to show off in the movie. If you are trying to break into sound editing, make sound a crucial part of the film. That's a really great way to, show off your skills. Lots of people hate limits on short films in film school, which I think is a dumb hate. Like, limits are great. You don't want long movies. Long movies suck, especially in film school, because most of the time they're not good. And the longer you make it, the less good it's going to be. I see question marks in the chat. What's the question mark? Oh, amen. Always too long. Yes, they are. A good 5-minute movie is so much better than a mediocre 20-minute movie. The other part of that is it feels like very special when you're in school to make a long personal movie. When you graduate and you're looking for jobs, and even if you put it on your website, no one is ever going to watch your movie, unfortunately, which kind of sucks because it's a huge labor of love, and I feel that pain too. You can't get anyone to watch your movie. There is a good chance, or if they're going to watch anything, they're going to watch your demo reel. So you should be making a movie, you should be making a thesis, making projects that set you up with a good demo reel. I had a decent demo reel, but specifically I made a reel out of my thesis when I graduated. And that was what I showed at my interview for Framestore, and that was what actually got me my job. So doing this was like one of the main reasons that I ended up getting hired. So absolutely, if you can, like, make a thesis that really supports you after you graduate. Don't let it die in the class. Another important thing while you're in school, find faculty to support you and your goals. It's literally their job. This seems really obvious, but not a lot of people do this. They are there to help you. They want to help you in those cases. And A lot of people sort of feel restricted to talk to their own academic advisor that they randomly get assigned to. I personally didn't have great luck with this. I mostly ended up talking to like professors that I found and like had some sort of shared experience with or shared interest. And I would go to them and like use them as a resource all the time. So make your own unofficial academic advisors. You know, find 2 or 3 that you really can understand and connect with, and that will look out for you. Use them to their fullest extent. Talk to them about projects, ideas, techniques. You're literally paying for that resource. You should be able to use it. And then lastly, many are past and or current professionals in the field that you're hoping to break into, and they can offer you their insight, their experience, their connections, and counsel you even after you graduate, which is really helpful. Okay, I'm gonna move along. Also, does anyone like the reference to the professor? He's like the coolest professor from whatever. Anyway, this is an even more obvious one, but it felt stupid to not include. Find friends to support you in your goals. It's not really their job, so you should make sure to help them too. Use organizations outside of school to help you get the job. Pretty obvious. The only reason I'm saying this is to lead into the next point, which is not a fun one, but a necessary evil. And that is, LinkedIn is your friend, even though it is kind of dumb. LinkedIn does have a bad reputation. It definitely deserves it. It's really cringy. I hate most of the posts that pop up on it. But it's really one of the most useful tools and like platforms that you can make for yourself and use to the fullest extent. Especially for posts. I don't know about production, but like every big post company has recruiters actively searching on LinkedIn. Every couple weeks, I always get like a request for a job or something on LinkedIn. Like they're always there, they're always looking. Totally worth making one. You can use it to make it now, so that way you can connect with people like that you're in school with now, if you haven't already. I think Spark makes you make one, but they're usually not good. So just go back and make it better. And yeah, it helps you create a contact base for all of these people that you already have met and that you will meet, and it just makes a bigger and bigger network. And it is really useful, and I do check it often, and people will message me and I'll message them. And it's a crappy platform, but it's the best one we got. And unfortunately, people use it, so you should too. So yeah, if you don't have one, make one. If you have one, make it better. It's only a few hours and it lasts a long time. And don't make awful content with it, because then you're part of the problem. So yeah, trademarked. I Googled it. No one else has said that, so that's me. That's on me.
Add it to Urban Dictionary.
Add it to Urban Dictionary, absolutely. Hell yeah, let's do it. Part 2, the biggie. This is probably the longest part in my 5-pronged plan. Applications, demo reels, and branding. And I guess I was going to say something else because there's another comma, but I got nothing else there. So we're going to move right along. Resume. You've probably heard a lot about resumes. They're not fun to talk about. There's nothing. Yeah, the reel is the big one. We're getting there, Eric. That one's saved for last. It is the big one though. Good point. Not a lot to say about this that you haven't already heard. Mine isn't a great example, but it's the one that I happen to have. A few of the things that I wanted to share, like that I've learned since the first resume I made for Spark, if you're in Ithaca, like the intro, I'm a communication student class, that they help you make a resume, which is great to have one, but they tell you some weird things. Like, I remember they had everyone include their education at the top, front and center, because it's Ithaca College. Of course, they want you to have your education at the top, front and center. It's not the most important thing. Your experience is the most important thing. Put the education to the side or second. Don't put it first. It's weird if you do that. Your GPA doesn't matter. No one really cares about your GPA. Good news, just don't fail and keep your scholarships. But no one's going to look at your GPA and like, well, he had a 3.6 versus a 3.8. I'm hiring the other guy. No one is going to do that. A doc-gift resume is acceptable. I'm kidding. Don't actually do that. So yeah, make sure that if you're applying for jobs all like in different cities, which is pretty common because you don't know where you're going to land, Los Angeles, New York, whatever, make sure that your resume either has no address or that your address is within the city that you're applying to the job for, because very often if you have a New York address and you apply for an LA job, they'll just throw the resume out. So one thing you can do, I know that Ithaca encourages you, even if you're in New York, you can just use the Ithaca Center as your address on LA resumes. So just make 2 resumes for different jobs. Make one that's like, in your own notes, like LA resume, and that way it has the right address on it, or New York resume, or just, leave it out. Addresses are getting more and more arbitrary with remote work, but that's probably the safer thing. Yeah, newer positions go on top, older go on lower. For whatever reason, Spark had me put my oldest stuff first and my newest stuff at the bottom. That is not common. Make sure your newest stuff is at the top. 1 page. There's a rule, if you have over 10 years of experience, you can do 2 pages. Very few people here qualify for that, and the ones that do are professors and have jobs, so it's irrelevant. So just keep your resume at 1 page. We're not special, we don't deserve more. PDF format is the absolute standard. Don't do a Word doc. Lots of people don't look at it in Microsoft Word, and the formatting gets really weird. So it can really screw up your very pretty resume. So just to be safe, always do it in a PDF. Don't just name it resume. That's probably an obvious one. But last name, first name, resume here. And then lastly, don't put things like teamwork. Don't put things like organization. Those are pretty arbitrary words. Prove it with like the blurbs that you write about yourself. Don't just like say that you know teamwork. Show that you worked with a team and like explain which teams you worked with. Recruiters see lots of resumes on a daily basis. It can help to make yours stand out if you use a simple color, maybe some cohesive branding, which we'll talk about later. But it doesn't hurt to have it stand out just a little bit. And lastly, if you want someone to look it over, you can go to academic services. You can email it to a professor, your unofficial academic advisor. Definitely feel free to get as many eyes on it as possible because it will never hurt you. This is an even less fun slide, so we'll go quick on it because cover letters suck. Cover letters are time consuming, but important. Each one you complete takes half a year off of your life expectancy. They're not always required anymore for all job applications because people kind of realize they're dumb, but they're still around, so you should have a couple templates for it. One thing that I will do is I'll create 2 or 3 different template letters depending on like which kind of position you're applying for. For example, I'll have like a motion graphics letter template or a compositing template. So that way, like I can start with like a basis of like a letter that I wrote for that position and then cater it a little more specifically. But you do still have to like make it individual to each application, which is the part that sucks. A really good rule of thumb is to look at the job description and see the bullet points that they write down, because those are going to be the bullet points they want to see in your cover letter. So like a sentence that literally addresses it point for point, bullet by bullet in the cover letter. So let's see. It's 5:20 and we're already on halfway through the slide, Shayna. How am I doing? I told you we'd be fine. Demo reels. So as Eric said, this is the bread and butter of your application process in post-production. Pretty much every discipline will have some sort of reel or portfolio of a kind. So it's important to keep that in mind just as you're going through school, that you can use your projects and things that you're proud of. Don't lose the files. Like keep that in mind as you're making the projects or writing them, that eventually this is all going to go towards something that gets you a job. So don't just phone in, like really make something that you're proud of every chance that you can. Most recruiters won't watch more than 1 minute of your reel. So cut it down to a minute from the get-go anyway, especially as like a junior. Like you don't want a 3-minute reel because no one's gonna watch it. And it kind of feels, it's like having a 2 or 3 page resume. It's just silly. So definitely have just a 1 minute reel. Put your best shots first. You wanna wow them with your best thing. Don't save it for last because there's a chance they'll close the tab before they get there if they're not impressed. But don't overextend yourself too. Like you don't want to put like the hardest possible things you can put in throughout like the whole reel, because if you get hired for an entry-level job, that's not the job you're going to be doing. Like you're not getting hired to do the crazy CG set extension composite with all these crazy effects and elements. 1, because if you attempt it as a student, it's probably not going to look great. And 2, because there's people with 15, 20 more years of experience than you to do it. So the things that you're going to be getting hired to do, at least in terms of visual effects, is rotoscoping, simple keys like matte extraction, screen replacements like cell phones, simple things, but they want to know that you can do the simple things really well. So junior work done very well is much better than an attempt to do senior work very poorly. It's kind of like the good short thesis is better than the long bad thesis. So yeah, definitely make sure to do that. Hold on. Yeah, so then you also want to start and end the reel with your information. It's not helpful if they have to work to find you or contact you, because they're, any kind of roadblock in the way of a recruiter getting to you is one more reason for them to put your application down and move to the next one. So if it's a reel for something visual arts related, make your title card reflect that. So if you're applying for a motion graphics position and your demo reel has an opening title card of Helvetica text that's white on a black background that doesn't move, that's already kind of a turnoff for me. Like you're trying to wow them from the get-go. And it's probably not as important for something like an editing reel where you're showing off the fact that you can cut something really nicely. But especially if it's like visual art and that's like typography, anything like that, you should be able to show that you have good taste with that pretty consistently. And lastly, if you're applying for, oh wait, hold on. I'm skipping a couple things here. Starting with, does a reel for some visual art? Yeah. Music, most of the time people will mute it anyway as they watch it. So don't get too attached to the music in your reel. Copyright, I go back and forth about. I'll use copyrighted music sometimes in mine. It's not good practice, but it doesn't really matter because it's usually a private link that you're sending to a recruiter and they mute it anyway. So it's pretty inconsequential. But a good rule of thumb is no lyrics in your music. Just stick with that one. Don't use default effects in Premiere for lower thirds and titles. Yeah, especially because they've all seen that. Like they all have like the low effort people sending the same lower third and the same default title in After Effects. So you don't just want to be another one of those people. No hamster dance music, please. Sure, not that either. So, and lastly, if you're, or not lastly, but if multiple people worked on a shot, you should be sort of specifying what contribution you made to the shot, usually with text like in the corner of the screen. Like if you did the green screen keying, but not the background, like the matte painting that went behind them, you should say like keying and like compositing, no DMP work, or some sort of way to specify that you're not taking credit for someone else's work. And then if you're applying for different types of positions, like when I graduated, I was applying for motion graphics and I was also applying for visual effects positions. So I had a reel for motion graphics and I had a reel for visual effects. And that way, because if it's one mega reel, you're wasting people's time by showing them your motion graphics in most cases if it's like a compositing job and they want to see that like you're specialized in that sense, unless it's a place that does it all, which is getting more and more common if it's like a smaller house or something like that. So next I have an example of a demo reel. This is a coworker of mine, and this is the reel that she made after graduating from the School of Visual Arts in New York City. And she got hired as a Framestore Launchpad intern in 2016, the same way that I did. And her reel is a lot better than mine. And she does a lot of things that I just talked about right. And I did not do a lot of those things that I talked about. So we're gonna treat this like professionals and we're gonna mute the reel because we're living in the real world now. She has a nice opening, tasteful background, good branding. And she starts off with like a comp that looks pretty decent, like it's a CG thing. She breaks it down really nicely. You can see her contributions in the bottom left. So she's starting off with something relatively complicated, but then most of it is actually just showing that she has good basics and fundamentals. Like showing a good mat as a junior is really important because that's the majority of what you're going to be doing. Or cleanup in this case, which that's kind of cleanup, roto, minor comp, green screen, composite, all like simple stuff that you're going to be expected to do. And then a couple of fun things at the end. I was talking to her today actually about reels in general, and she said that a good rule of thumb is 20% of it should be cool stuff that you're trying to wow them with, and 80% of it should be really good fundamentals that prove that you can do the jobs you're actually going to get assigned. Because you want to show that you have potential for growth and like you're trying bigger things, but most of it should just be about consistency and that you're, able to do the things you're going to be tasked to do. So, and then any questions so far? I'm whipping through a lot of this. So I don't know if Jacob is here, but I know that he worked on, or anyone that's worked on a reel, if you guys want to talk about like what's specific to like your field or just sort of tips that you've picked up and like things that you like about your reel or don't like about your reel, feel free to unmute yourself at this time.
I will say for color reels, I just put it in the chat, but to elaborate just a little bit, what a lot of times I'll see people do for their reels is they'll include a wipe or a fade or something from the original log image from the camera and transition to the fully graded image, which is not an accurate representation of what you are doing to the image. Ideally, you're showing the transition from the normalized Rec 709 image to the what you graded in yours, which is a more accurate. It looks
really
a little
good
bit
point.
it looks a little bit less flashy because it's less of a dramatic change, but it is, that is properly showing what you're actually doing to the image, just because the transformation from log to Rec 709 is something that any platform can do, and is just a normalization. That's not, a creative thing.
Yeah, 80% of the change that's happening there is just like an algorithm that's already pre-decided. Like the change to Rec 709 is the most dramatic part of the whole process, but the artistic part of the process is the stuff you're doing after that conversion to linear. So that's a really good point. And I never thought about that. I remember your reel had a wipe, I think. So that's really funny.
Yeah, it might be
Listen,
in mine, but
there's a reason I'm showing someone else's reel from school and not my own, because mine sucks. So we have a question from the chat. If we're going for something more general, like story editing, assistant editor stuff, what should we show? So you should do an editing reel. And there's a couple different approaches to that. And you can go on YouTube actually and just see like good examples of it. Like literally if you type in good video editing reel, you can pretty much crowdsource like what good practices are for that. And someone else can chime in if they know more about it. But I've seen it where lots of people will take a scene that they cut and put it into the reel, or several scenes like small vignettes, or they'll literally just cut together a sizzle reel of cool things that they've made. There's sort of two approaches to it. I think most of the rules I talked about with like keeping it under a minute probably still stand, and like you want your title and your branding and all that. But for just general editing, yeah, it's either a scene or a sequence or a collection of sequences or like an overall sizzle reel of cool cuts and cool things. And Shana, you can correct me on that, but that's my general understanding of it.
Yeah, I agree. So either like go genre, so show that you can cut together different genres. So like a heavy dialogue scene versus an action scene versus like a really quiet scene with long shots, and a scene with a lot of people talking, and how do you organize that and like create some focus during chaos. So I would just show some variety in an editing reel.
Yeah, I'd also say even like, depending on the type of material you have, if you can make a story using different stories, that also can show that you have an understanding of putting together different elements. That would definitely show your understanding of editing from that perspective.
Meta edit of your edits. I like it.
Exactly.
That's cool. I didn't even think about that. That's a good point. We have another question. Will we give links under the reel if they want to see the full video, or only give them the reel? I guess it depends on in what way you're providing it to them. Like if it's a cold email, I guess you could. Most of the time when you apply on portals, it's just going to have a link for your reel, or it might have a link to your like website or portfolio. So if you have a website and you have your demo reel on your website, they can sort of make the choice to navigate over to the tab on your website that has your actual like short films. So if they felt so inclined, it's pretty accessible, but it's not like, you know, in the description of your YouTube video, which I guess you could do too. There's no hard and fast rules about it, but most of the time they won't really watch it. So doesn't hugely make a difference, but definitely that's actually bringing you to a good point that I don't think I talked about at all in this presentation. Websites are expensive to maintain, to like buy a domain. There's a couple different choices like Squarespace, GoDaddy. You can buy it just like domain space and then like actually make the website yourself, which is a bit cheaper. You could get a friend who's in web dev to make it for you and just pay for like the domain space. There's a bunch of different ways to do it. But if you can swing it, I know that that's big because like students and debt and all that unfortunate stuff. But if you can make a website, it can be really helpful for that reason that you described. You can have your demo reel, you can have your demo reels all in one place. You can have your resume as a tab, and about tab, all that kind of stuff, all in one place. So that way, if you have like someone, or if you want to send the link, it's just one link to your website. It's not multiple YouTube links. Is card okay? What's card? I don't know what card is. C-A-R-R-R-D. Oh,
I think card is kind of like a Wix thing, but for like super simple sites.
oh, then probably. If it has a place to embed you like videos, then yeah, it's fine. I will say depending on where you apply, some people get weirdly uppity about like, you know, averyherzog.com or .xyz/wixsitefree.com. Some people will look at that and be like, oh, you're cheap. But I think that's stupid. But unfortunately, older people will be looking at these and they're not as enlightened, I guess. I don't know.
I think it's what, like $20 a year, even cheaper, just for a domain name registration and redirect. So you don't have to spend that much to get an actual domain name.
Send
This
me
video is
information
brought
because
to you
I'm
by
paying too much for my
Squarespace.
website then. So that's a really good point. Yeah, Calvin, that's a good point too. Like social media especially for like Calvin's in animation. I feel like more so, and you can even unmute yourself and let me know. But I feel like Twitter isn't a great place for VFX artists. Twitter is a great place for animators. So it's not necessarily that everything is going to be the same for all disciplines. They are all a little different. And I know that for someone like Calvin, like lots of people will post their work on Twitter, and like there's a huge community for animation and just collaboration and seeing other people's work and getting jobs through Twitter, like DMs, like that's weirdly common in that field. So Linktree is good for that. Social media posts are excellent for that. All really good ways to sort of expand your online presence. And yeah, look into whatever your discipline likes to use, because you might get on LinkedIn as an animator and find that Twitter is more helpful, or vice versa. Yeah, and Instagram for work is good. I don't really use Instagram that much, but I know more people do. So it is good for that, especially for motion graphics. It's really good for Instagram. I know that like David is really into MoGraph on Insta, and there's a lot of like content creation, and it gets passed around quite a bit. So to each their own. All right. Moving along to branding. This is going to tie all of the parts together that we just talked about: your resume, your website, your portfolio. It ties it all together with visual consistency. So pick a style, any style. Try to sort of brand yourself with some sort of design or with some sort of font, like some sort of color scheme. Pick something that suits like the discipline you're trying to break into, and also like your own personality if you feel so inclined. So I like to use Calvin's logo in particular because I think it's awesome. Like I really like his design. I like his font because he is a 2D like character animator. And you look at that and it's just fun. Like it totally evokes that sense of exactly what he wants it to, both within his field and what kind of person he is. And then you look at, for instance, David, and it's like a very sleek, clean MoGraph type thing. Mine is pretentious and overly flashy. So you know that I'm in visual effects, I guess. And then my friend Tom, who is not in Park Post, but is also a very talented motion designer, has a very sort of sleek, simple style because that's the kind of person he is. So yeah, pick one, play around with it, see what works for you. But once you pick it, stick with it. The whole point of it is to create a sense of consistency and cohesion. So if you make something and you start sending things out, make sure that all of it matches. That's literally like the most important part. If it doesn't, there's no reason to do it because it just gets confusing and noisy and messy. So pick a color, pick a font, and just roll with it. Roll it out to every single thing that you send. Let's see. yeah, use it consistently across your resume, cover letter, website, demo reel, portfolio, etc. Mine has a logo, and a couple of the ones that I showed you have a logo. You don't need a logo. That we're being extra. You can if you want, especially if you're like a graphic designer or something. It's a really good idea. But if you're an editor and like that's not your thing, don't force it. Like most people don't have that, and it's not a big deal. It's really not any plus in your favor. Really more when I say branding, I more mean the actual like making a consistent color, if you choose to use color, font, and just overall style with your application materials. It makes you cohesive, it makes you memorable because they see so many things that are just like Helvetica text on a white background. And just having something that stands out a little bit will hopefully jog their memory and remind them of like when they saw your other materials or that sort of thing. Go easy on crazy colors. Simple is generally better unless you really know what you're doing. In the case of like animators or graphic designers, where it's literally a part of their like sort of overall brand. Like Calvin, I would say, is a great exception to that rule because that's his thing, and that's totally working in his favor. But for most people, like 95% of the time, you should probably stick with like a really mute, simple, like blue, red, green, something unoffensive. Also, you don't even have to feel pressured to use color. You can have effective branding with just black and white. Some people have strong feelings about color in resumes. So yeah, you can sort of pick and choose how you want to do that. Everyone has different opinions and none of them are wrong. Yes, that is a good point. Yeah, Helvetica does have a place. I like to hate on it. But, and then the saturation is a really good point too. Even with Calvin's color, it wasn't like overly saturated. It was all very, it seems like very crazy, but it's all very tastefully done because he's an expert, and that's why it works for the people in those fields, because they are experts. Make sure your resume can print. That is a really good point that I left out. Definitely test it out because a lot of people, old folk, boomers, if you will, that are actually doing some of the recruiting, like paper for some reason and want to kill trees, and will print their stuff out and do it that way. And it needs to look good on paper because that's the whole point. So definitely test that out before you just upload your PDF. Make sure it doesn't bleed off the edge awkwardly or cut anything off or have awful, artifacting. So cool. All right. How are we doing on time? Doing pretty good. Part 3, interviewing. These are pretty quick because I don't have a lot to say about interviewing. It's all pretty situational. Remember, the whole reason they're talking to you is because they like you. So you really don't have to be too nervous at this point, just professional. Like they're not gonna most of the time waste their time talking to you if there's not a chance you're gonna get this job already. So high five yourself, you did it, great start, keep going. Most interviews are through Zoom. So take advantage of that, like have your resume and any other documents or notes like ready in another tab to reference if you need to. I'll pull up like my resume, like my reel breakdown, like anything that I need to reference really quickly. And on the fly, like that's a huge advantage that in-person interviews we did not have. So, and other people are doing it. So make sure that you are too, otherwise you'll kind of look like you're stumbling around a little bit. I have 3 monitors up right now just for a silly PowerPoint. So for a job, you should have a whole lot going on. Let's see, what is the next one? Dress to impress. I hate the fact that I use that phrase, but not too much. Yeah, just like, in general, most of these fields are pretty casual. Like you don't want to just wear like, a tank top or something, but you definitely don't need a suit or even a tie really. Tie mandatory. Let me work there, that sounds cool. Yeah, it's usually pretty casual. Just like moderately nice and nothing offensive is the overall gist. Consider your surroundings, same vibe, just make sure it's an unoffensive background and like your roommates are quiet, or at least know that you're having it so they don't come in and interrupt it. That's not the end of the world if that's the case. People are pretty understanding. I do a lot of meetings with like people have their kids on their lap and like people have their dogs, and like everyone understands that we're all at home right now. And we're pretty well adjusted to that, but still do your best with your setting within reason. Do your homework, research the company beforehand. That's pretty easy. Just look it up, Google everything about the company if it's small and you don't know a lot about it. Ask questions. Ask lots of questions. Look up the company and write down questions ahead of time, so that way you can just have things to ask if nothing pops up in the middle of it, because asking shows that you're enthusiastic about it. Yeah, always send a thank you email. That's pretty obvious. Just thank them for the interview, even if it was trash. And then, yeah, lastly, like if remember, they're not just interviewing you, you're interviewing them. If you don't like the vibe, just like it means that you don't have to pick them either. So it goes both ways. And that's really important for you to use that time to gauge whether or not you feel comfortable working in that setting. We're gonna move on. I guess I used a lot of exclamation points. Okay, ooh, I gotta move down here. Part 4, you've got the job. Now what? Business casual is the way to go. Yes, that is a good way to put it. Starting up, standing out, and doing your best. Stuff I learned from my experience. Do your new homework. Getting the job can be hard, which is unfortunate, but also doing the job is pretty hard. So like your work doesn't stop once you get it. Doing your new homework means when you get there, there's going to be a whole lot of stuff that you just don't know, and that's okay. And a lot of people are going to help you along the way. But a lot of the time you are going to have to go home and like literally look things up ahead of time. Like for the first 2 or 3 weeks of my internship, pretty much every night I was going home and just like blasting through tutorials because I just did not understand the software and I was very intimidated. And it just required a lot of extra work. I was going to lunch and like looking up screen comp tutorials and Nuke on my phone in the pizza place that I'd have to go back and do, 45 minutes from that moment and just pretend I knew how to do it. You just sort of have to keep on like doing things outside of the time you're already expected to in a lot of cases to really get going, which is hard and not always possible, and it's okay, but just do your best with it. Always say yes to a challenge or task. They're never going to ask you to do something impossible, and they're expecting to help you when they ask it. So don't be afraid, just like, take the help when you can get it. And yeah, keep saying yes to things because the more that you do, the more that they'll think you're eager. And the more that you'll also grow, which is really cool. Even if you don't even know how to do it, it's okay to like say you want to do it. They'll help you along the way. Ask lots of questions. Definitely over communicate. That was the number one thing. I talked to some of my coworkers before this, and they were like, "Yeah, over communicating is the best thing you can do in this kind of situation." Highly recommend it. Everyone there is going to want you to succeed. Don't be afraid to reach out. And then the other thing that you should do, and this applies to any interview, and I think it's really good, and they're not going to tell you that, is you should try to set up some sort of review system for yourself if they don't already have one in place. Like create checkpoints for yourself throughout your experience. One, because it lets them know you're serious about it and that like you're taking initiative with like your progress. And 2, if they do have problems with what you're doing, you find out as early as possible and like you can course correct as you go, which is really helpful. So definitely as you're going, keep that going. Let's see, I see something. If you don't know the exact software, but have foundational knowledge, you're eager to learn, you're golden. Yes, that is absolutely true. Foundational knowledge is more important than software knowledge. Let's see, so that's that. And then this is the same one, but starting up, standing out, and succeeding while working from home. Working from home as an entry-level worker is very different than everyone else in your company will have entered their field. They entered when it was very common to, work all in the same room and you're able to look over each other's shoulders. And it's just, you learn a lot just by being around them. So there's an opportunity for you to just miss a lot if you are remote. I see a question. For the checkpoint tip, how far in would you want a checkpoint for yourself? So what I did was a little before halfway, probably 2 weeks before halfway through my internship, I was like, hey, can we meet halfway and talk about my progress? Which I think is it's like more than reasonable. You could do more if you wanted to, like after 2 weeks, check in and be like, hey, how'd my first 2 weeks go? If like you're, uncomfortable or sort of want to make sure. I don't think anyone would fault you for that, but halfway is probably what I would recommend. Unless anything else extra came up that you felt uncomfortable or unsure about. They'll never say no to talking to you, which is really great. So, and if they do, you don't want to work there anyway. So let's see. Yeah, wallflower interns can no longer exist. This is the quote from my coworker. We are too busy to remember you are there. So they're very busy, and to them, you're just another name in like GChat. And so unless you like communicate and over communicate, they will never know that you're there. And so it'll be really easy to let time go by and to not learn and grow the same way that like people in person had the chance to, because in person, you're able to sort of learn through osmosis. That does not exist here. You have to advocate for yourself to learn. See what sort of system that their company already uses in order to share screens. It might be proprietary. Like at work, we have a system that we use that like lets us not just share screens, but like interact on each other's screens and like both use the controls for it. Like we can both drive. So that's really important. If they don't have a good system of doing that, one, that's crazy. Two, figure out a way, because watching someone work is still one of the best ways to learn, because as they're working, you can ask them questions and vice versa. Like they can watch you work and tell you what you're doing wrong. So figure out a way to make that the way, because if you can share screens, it's almost as good as being in person. It's really not too different. The only difference is asking to look or asking to be watched, which you also have to be really important about. Yeah, over communicate, which we talked about. Find a mentor. Same deal as the professors. Find unofficial mentor advisors. Have one or two of them that you can count on to spend time with over Zoom and learn from. That way, if you have a question that pops up, you have like at least one, if not like a couple people you can go to with like, hey, you know, I got asked to do this. I'm not entirely sure. That's really common for like juniors and stuff in our company, because they don't have, you know, they'll find one or two people who helped them on a job before and they felt really comfortable with them. And they'll just kind of, even if they're not on the same job, ask them questions here and there. And all the time, people always like make time to help them. Like we want everybody to succeed too. And we've been in your position and you guys have it worse because you're remote. So we're entirely sympathetic if we remember that you're there. That's the biggest part of it. Find ways to meet in person safely. There are, for various companies, like certain events that are voluntary, like drinks, movies, anything that gets you FaceTime with coworkers, like try to participate if you feel comfortable and safe to do so. And then, yeah, make virtual community. There's a lot of really cool ways you can interact with coworkers now. Lots of offices have Discords with various like chats and like cool things to participate in. We have one where people share art. They have like a cooking channel. I play video games once a week with my department. Whatever floats your boat, try to find other people who have the same boat. And yeah, just try to find ways to spend time and connect. All right, how are we doing time-wise? All right, we're doing pretty good. I will try to rip through the last part of it. Part 5, you are nailing your internship. Time to finish strong. All right, have the I want a job talk. So your job is going really well. You're finishing up, you're close to finishing up. Ask for another meeting sort of the week before your internship or position is wrapping up. And try to talk with your supervisor about like what to do next with your career, what your goals are. For me, that meant letting them know that I really, really liked it there and that I wanted to keep working there and that it was like a dream being able to have worked there the past few weeks, and I learned a lot and I wanted to keep that going. And just having the time, like making the time to set aside and let them know that it made a huge difference in them like deciding what to do with me next, which was pretty cool. They extended my booking and they transitioned me from an intern to a freelancer, which was really kind of them. And then another kindness that they did just out of the goodness of their hearts was like, even after my booking ended, because like they wanted me to succeed, my supervisor literally helped me find work at another company just because they wanted me to keep growing until there was like a staff position available at Framestore. So making a personal connection and like setting aside time to meet and talk about your goals and like what you think you can do with them really goes a long way, even to the point where they will help you somewhere else if it means eventually you coming back and helping them. So that was really cool kindness they did to me. And I'm sure there are lots of people who do those kinds of things in the field. So, but it doesn't happen if you don't talk to them and let them know what you want and sort of how it's going. So definitely keep going with that. So other talk to have the freelance talk. The meme here was only available in impact form. So hello, fellow kids, I apologize. The field in post it's mostly freelance. So it's really important to learn the system. I didn't have a really good understanding of it before graduating. So learning it before you get like offers and like ask for holds and stuff like that is really important. Totally talk to your professors about it because they've also probably experienced this too. But right before I got offered my freelance position at Framestore, the career manager was like, "What's your day rate? Like, can I hold you?" And I was like, "Hey, can we talk?" And she's like, "Sure." I was like, "Can you just like talk to me, not as like an employer, but as a mentor?" because I don't know what any of this means, and I don't even know like what to price myself as. And she was really kind, and she sat down. She's like, here's what someone of like your skill level should ask for, and like here's how this works. So learning the difference between like a day rate and an hourly rate, what's expected of you. A day rate, you get paid for the whole day. Hourly rate assumes usually a 10-hour day, but that's not guaranteed. You should ask about overtime, how that works, whether it's time and a half, whether there is overtime, for what hours per day or per week overtime happens. And then there's the whole hold system, which I'll go over quickly because I know I'm running out here. There's holds when you do freelance. So there's 3 different kinds of things for the most part. You can get booked, which is like a hard booking, like you're expected to show up that day. You can get a hold, a first hold, which means we don't know if we're going to book you yet, but we'd like to reserve your time. And there's a second hold, which is like, well, we don't really want to book you immediately, but we'll give you a second hold, which is kind of like a backup to the backup. And there's a whole bunch of weird etiquette you can play where like, if you have a first hold somewhere and another company wants to like hire you like as freelance, like book you for that time, you have 24 hours to, or you email the company you have a hold with, and you have 24 hours for them to like respond and like book you. And if they don't book you within 24 hours, you're allowed to leave that first hold and go to the other booking. Like they have the right to release you. But they also, it means that like, if they're like, we will use you during that first hold, they'll just book you and that other offer doesn't matter. And second hold is 1 degree removed from that. So just knowing they exist and knowing to like look it up again to refresh your memory when that comes up is really important. Because I remember one of my first jobs, they're like, can I put you on first hold? And I was like, we're not on the phone. I don't need to be on hold. I didn't get it. So yeah, highly recommend learning that system. Your professors are good resources for that too. And then on the way out, get your credits. If you don't have one, set up an IMDb. It's really easy. Everyone thinks it's hard. You pretty much just make one right now if you felt so inclined, I'm pretty sure. Before you add your credits, wait for your show to come out. Sometimes the company will like add them for you. So you don't want to seem like that eager dude who put it on really early and then they add a second one, or they really delete the first one. Wait for the show to come out. If it's not on there yet, you can just add it yourself. No one's going to stop you. Just don't be a jerk about it. Don't add stuff you haven't worked on, because if you do that, it's really bad practice. If people find out, they'll come after you and they'll never hire you again, and you'll die alone. You can get IMDb Pro if you want. I don't have it. I don't feel strongly about it. Talk to people who have it if you do. It really, I don't know. I don't think it adds that much for our field. If you're an actor or a director, it's important, but we're not. So it kind of doesn't matter. And then the other important thing on the way out is talk to your producer about getting what you worked on for your reel, because you're not entitled to it depending on what NDAs you sign. But very often, like if you worked on something that's cool and you want to show it on your reel afterwards, legally they have to get it cleared. So like they'll go through a whole bunch of stuff. It can take a little while. So stay in contact, be patient, be persistent, and hopefully you will get it. And lastly, questions, comments, concerns, legal advice, and opinions on the Batman. I'm only accepting positive opinions on the Batman at this time. Sorry, that was a lot. How would you explain to parents that freelancing is normal? I think that's a really good point, because there's a lot of pressure from parents. I think the important thing is there's weirdly a distinction between like, there's like freelance and there's like freelance, which like freelance is when you have bookings and you have holds and like you're hustling around and you have like good contacts and like people are asking you. Freelance is like CEO at self-employed at freelance.com. It's like a little bit different. I had another slide. That's fine. It was just my contact info. Doesn't matter. Oh, permalance is another thing too. I saw a comment about that. I don't know where it went. Yeah, permalance is another thing where it's like they don't want to give you health insurance, but they want you to be staffed. So you're permalance. It's kind of rude, but it's also pretty common. And I've been permalance before at different places. So that's common, unfortunate, and you can make it work. It's honestly not that bad, but it's more just scummy work practice. So yeah, same. My first job was permalance too. So my first year student, where should I start trying to do internships? I guess that depends on what kind of discipline you want to go into, and also where you would have access to be. Like it's pretty common to do them over the summer. So if you can go to New York City for a summer, then great. if you do like a semester in LA, like you can worry about internships then. You don't need to do internships like super early. Like obviously the more you do and the earlier you do them, great, that's awesome. But like there's no crazy pressure. Like when you're a freshman, there's so much other stuff going on. I didn't get my first internship until summer after my sophomore year. And even that was like really early. You don't need to do it that early if you don't want to. I didn't know what I was doing most of the time. I was probably more of a hindrance to that company than a help. So there's no pressure. Let's see. But yeah, so do it on your own time. Freelance pays more. Yes, that's true. So the other important thing is freelance does pay more on a daily basis than like a staff position, because it is unstable. So like it's a bit riskier of a business model. And it means that they can hire you for X amount of days and not worry about it, compared to like staff where like you're there year round and there might not necessarily be work, but that way you're available if they need you. But in freelance, like you can do really, really well. Some people really prefer it. It's a preference thing. Like there is absolutely nothing wrong with freelancing your entire career. People make hundreds of thousands of dollars doing it. Flame artists can charge like $1,500 a day as a freelancer. So it really has kind of a dirty word, but there like just a bad association with it because of those people on LinkedIn who are like freelance at CEO at Self or whatever, which, you know, that's all hard too. I'm not making fun of those people. I'm only kind of making fun of those people. But yeah, totally worth noting both are valid. If we want to make a website for branding and such, should we include scripts, storyboards, character designs we are proud of, even if you're interested in a post-production career? Yeah, absolutely. Especially if you don't know which, like, exactly what you're applying for, absolutely include extra tabs. For a while on my website, I had like a whole tab, which is like a gallery of like 3D modeling that I thought was cool. It was cool when I was a student. I realized I didn't want to do it, so I removed it. But when I was in college and like while I was applying to jobs, I had like a gallery for graphic design and for 3D modeling, and like it shows that you're well-rounded if you want to be, and if you're applying for jobs closer to that field, it's good that they know that you understand it. So that's it's totally worth including. Just don't make it like the highlight of your website. Make it like tab 4 or tab 5, not the first 2 tabs. And hello, let's see, no healthcare or benefits on freelance. That is why I like staff, because I like having healthcare in this dystopian society. But you can also, that's not to knock being freelance and getting your own healthcare. It's possible. It's just an expense you have to plan on, which is part of that extra money that you're making as a freelancer. It's not really, because you know you're eventually going to have to use it for health insurance. But if you play your cards right, you can make a whole lot more money and pay for your own health insurance. So it's really definitely a preference thing. Let's see.
Adam has his hand up.
Oh yeah, thank you. Hi. So I know you touched a little bit on social media and like posting there early. I'm graduating in May and then going out to LA for the Ithaca LA program. And I'm right in the middle of like doing all the cover letter resume mess.
Oh yeah, it sucks.
It's terrible. A lot of templates. I just wanted to know if not having anything posted on social media is like a big detriment or not.
Like not having any creative work or like on your social media, or not having a social media presence at all?
Kind of both. I just don't really have that much of a presence, and like I mainly edit, so I don't know how to.
I don't think that especially as an intern, like that's not really the good thing about social media is like once you get going, it's a great way to like share your current work and to like share with your peers that you've acquired at different companies, and like they can tell you about openings here and there, and it just keeps you in the loop. If you're applying for internships, the social media isn't really what's going to get you in there, because they're not going to look at that per se. That's more like once you have a network built and you're able to share things and see things other people post and like acquire sort of connections that way. So totally no stress on social media. Yeah, just keep doing your thing with like resumes, websites, portfolios, reels, all that kind of stuff is incredibly more important for sure.
Awesome, thank you so much.
Yeah, for sure. Let's see. Eric, you have your hand up.
I did.
Oop. Oh, you did. Maybe don't. There's a question in the chat, which is fine. So I'll answer that too. I was also wondering if there's a good job or internship market for editing in London. That's a place where I could most likely spend a summer there. Yeah, London. So I don't know if you're an Ithaca student or a Syracuse student, but I know that Ithaca has a pretty robust London program. They do have internships. I don't know how the whole visa thing works with internships. I know people who have had them there before. There are extra hurdles involved, especially if it's a paid internship. But it's totally doable and it exists. And like there is work in London for editing and visual effects as well. Visual effects is the biggest hub for the industry of visual effects is in London by far. And I'm sure that post-production has to surround that. So it's very, very popular for all of that stuff. It definitely exists. Need a visa to work in London. That would make sense. So you might have to pay a little bit. There's also, in general, with internships, there is a bit more complications with like paid versus like requires credit. There's a couple things. They shouldn't be allowed to make you work for free and also not give you college credit. They should give you one, the other, or both. So don't ever accept an internship that does not give you college credit or money, because that's a scam, which I think the Disney college program does that, just so you know. But they might pay you, but it's a joke. Anyway, not to knock that. I'm sure it's fine. People like it, but whatever. Anyway, as a current freelancer, I just want to say it can be annoying sorting things out with clients without the backing of a company. Be very specific with your contracts and open up the contracts, the idea that they might need to pay more if they want more. Absolutely, get things in writing too. It's very easy to just have people be like, you're hired, and then like they can fire you on the spot because there's nothing written. When you start somewhere, whether it's freelance or anything, just get it in writing. If it's piecework, get the bid in writing, have them sign off on it, have them verbally send the email back, be like, I approve this work, like get it in writing, hold them accountable. If you don't have a paper trail, then it's very, very easy for them to just shrug you off because you have nothing to make them accountable. Cool. Any other questions about any of that stuff? Any questions about Framestore, VFX, Launchpad program? Super cool. I swear, I liked it. I liked it a lot. It's a cool deal.
One thing that Sam brought up earlier on breakdowns for color reels. What are your opinions on breakdowns in general for reels?
Breakdowns in general for reels are super helpful. They kind of can show you what part you're contributing to, where and why. It's like it helps even more so than just that little text blurb because you can see the work as you go. Sam brings up a good point where like it is easy to exaggerate how much you do if it's a really impressive before and after. Because like if I'll do like a CG comp with a breakdown, and it's like, oh, look at the geometry and then look at the texturing, and it's like I literally only did comp, and then I show all those breakdowns. It's like, well, you didn't do much, but you got good CG handed to you, so that's nice. But they're generally super helpful. And the other thing with that too is they're kind of hard to get, at least on a professional level, because houses will not give you lots of plates. In some cases, they like legally aren't allowed to give you the raw plate. They can only give you the finished thing. So having them makes you stand out because they're not as common as they could be, unless you're the actual post house doing your own breakdowns, in which case you have access to everything. But it's super helpful to include them for sure.
Thanks.
Yeah, write-offs are cool. You can write off things on your taxes. Sorry, Sam, what were you going to say?
I was just going to add one other note for color reels. It's just that oftentimes I think a good way to kind of construct a color reel is by including, you know, shots across a similar scene, because if you just include one image, you know, anybody can make a single image look good. Part of the job is kind of making an entire scene or entire short look good. So it's kind of helpful to show multiple shots from within one scene as opposed to just one shot. You should definitely include, you know, beautiful shots that look great on their own, but a lot of the job is, you know, making an entire scene consistent. So it's helpful to include multiple angles from a different scene and things like that, as well as just the individual pretty looking shots.
That makes sense. Yeah, it's kind of like proving consistency and just sort of goes back to being able to prove you can do things consistent and well rather than just really nice things sporadically.
Exactly.
So they want someone. The other thing that reminds me, the other important thing that I didn't tell you guys, in general, it's so much more important to have like a really good work ethic and to have a really positive attitude than to know the latest software or to be the most talented person in the room, because those people very often aren't the ones who do well. They really aren't. And that's been told to me by multiple people. Like having an attitude where like you're not negative and you can move forward and you can sort of maneuver around curveballs and like you just keep your head up the whole time is way, way, way more important than like that, you know, knowing all the shortcuts or anything. That kind of stuff can be taught. A good attitude cannot be taught. So it is by far the more valuable asset to show off in an interview. And just in your first couple weeks on the job. That's why like saying yes is important, communicating is important, because they value that so much more. I had a supervisor who said that juniors are either one of two people who think that they're rock stars and are jerks and end up sucking, or people who think that they're really bad and then work really hard because they think they're really bad and they end up being the best employees. And I think he was kind of telling me that I was the one that sucked, but I was okay with it. So it was fine. He was a nice guy. Yeah, send a thank you note. I had a bullet about that. I nailed that part. Cool. Yeah, I guess if there are no more questions, totally add me on LinkedIn, ask me questions about the Framestore internship, about any internship. I like being a resource just as much as professors do. I think it's really fun to sort of see these communities grow and get better and bigger. So if I can help you in any way, I totally will. And yeah, don't be a stranger.
You want to put up your finale card again?
Oh, sure. Absolutely. Why not? Why not? Screen 2. Boop. No one told me about what they thought about the Batman, but that's fine. I know it's good.
thought it was
I don't need to
good.
hear it again. Good. We followed the prompt. So yeah, totally. Add me on LinkedIn. It sucks, but it's the best place to find me. So, and thanks for coming. I know it was a long one. I know it's not a fun one. It's not a sexy one. Like there's no cool stuff to look at, but this is all stuff that I thought was really important and really, it's either stuff that helped me or stuff that I wish I knew. So in both cases, I think it's worth finding out. And the earlier you find it out, the better. And yeah, keep expanding upon it.
It's like junior work. Gets the point across. It's not flashy, but you know what
It's
you're
not
doing.
flashy. Yeah, this is probably like the least fun one you guys have done all year, but I swear it was really helpful, and jobs are cool because money's cool, because not dying is cool. So get a job.
Eric, did you want to plug the Fuse one again?
Sure. So I also work for a VFX studio. Both Luke and I actually work at Fuse FX, and we also currently have an apprenticeship program that we are eagerly starting, looking for people to be interns, or not even interns, really, apprentices to get hired as juniors eventually. It's a nice 6-month program, I believe.
Yep. Cool. That's
I'll
awesome.
drop a link.
Yeah, it's cool that they do programs like that, Eric, because ours is like a similar idea, and it's important for both of those. They're internships, but only they're really more like what London would consider an apprenticeship. Like it's like your entry level job. It's not so much an internship, although it can be treated that way. So
Let's see, Fuse FX Academy.
And then I know we're kind of out of time, but I don't know if Luke and Rebecca and David, who else is here? Sam, Eric. I don't know if any of you want to talk about the entry level positions at your companies quickly, because it's not just compositor.
Yeah. I mean, I think we're still looking for coordinators at Fuse FX also, which is one of the liaisons to the producer, helping organize, people getting files and sending stuff off to clients. Just being a good communicator between all parties, basically. You're literally coordinating everything going on.
It's very fun.
Yes. Luke is a coordinator at Fuse FX. He works with me.
Yeah, we're buddies.
And we're still working.
Right now, I'm making Eric's night hell. Yeah. I'm the one that gets to tell Eric when he goes to sleep.
I will say that Avery and Eric and David and Sam are part of like the original group, and then they've gotten people jobs who are in this group as well. So it's all like, this is your network. So make sure.
Here for you.
What?
I said we're here for you. So like for you, for like the group, like we're here for all of you. Like I spent my weekend making a silly PowerPoint with dumb GIFs because I want to get you guys jobs. So
What's the name of the position you were talking about?
The one that I
Which
just said,
Yeah,
it's a VFX coordinator
gotcha. Thank you.
or office coordinator, but that's the person that's literally running like the office. That's usually like kitchen duty or packages, like front desk kind of stuff that some
Okay.
internships will have you do.
Gotcha. Thanks.
Sam, any openings at Harbor, or Rebecca, anything at Alchemy?
I'm not sure of the current openings at Harbor actually, but there are things popping up all the time. We seem to be using LinkedIn a lot for that, so definitely check our LinkedIn page. It seems to be a lot of dailies jobs opening up. I think that's
I have seen a lot of dailies posts from Harbor. Actually, I've seen a couple.
Yeah.
Of those.
I'm not. They might be in different locations. They're not. I don't think they're all for New York, but that is a common entry point is dailies. A lot of times people start in coordinator roles or, kind of conform assist kinds of roles, and then kind of work their way up from there. So yeah, there's multiple entry points, even if it's not exactly the specific role or, path that you had intended. Anything can kind of get your foot in the door there.
Yeah. Side note, if it wasn't mentioned before, follow the companies on like Instagram, for example, because a lot of time they're trying to advertise that they have job openings and they will do a lot of social media posts.
also add the recruiters for the companies on LinkedIn. They're never going to not add you back, and that way you see the things they post. So you just know as soon as it goes up, which is really helpful.
Yeah, because even if like you talk to them once, you didn't get that job, they'll still have you in their file, in the record, so that if a future job comes up, they can reach out to you again.
Yeah, absolutely.
Rebecca, Calvin.
I know right now they're looking for a social media intern. But other than that, I'm sure if you like wanted to come work at Alchemy and you put in a letter of interest or something, they would definitely like look into it. They're always looking for like compositors or sometimes coordinators, depending on how many shows they have going on, depending on like the season. So yeah, social media, if you're interested, definitely.
Expression of interest emails also can be very powerful depending on who you reach out to. Because I did that once to a company. They didn't have openings for a particular job, but I reached out to them anyway, saying like, if anything ever opens up in the future, like just a nice little cover letter type of email explaining who I was, what I liked, my passions and whatnot, and what was interesting about them that caught my attention. And
Yeah.
they reached out in a couple hours after that and wanted to talk to me. So that will help you a lot.
Another really important thing to keep in mind here is that it takes a lot of volume to really even hear back from like a couple people, which is really discouraging. So it's easy to get discouraged. So don't. I think when I graduated, I applied to something like 90 something positions. I heard back from like 20.
Yep.
I got like through an interview with like 10 of them. And I think the first job I friend, like it's really hard. This is a tough process, which is why it takes a while to get a handle on, and we still don't know everything. So like not by a long shot, but just the more you do it, the better you get at it. And don't take any of it personally. And some of the companies that reject you, that's a good thing. A lot of them suck. So count your blessings. The right one will come along and you'll be really glad when it does. There are a couple that I remember just really desperately wanting the job, didn't care what the work was. And I look back and I'm so glad I didn't get it. Like I literally thank whatever deity there is that I did not get the job, because it just would not have been the experience I have now, which is perfect. So.
Cool. Well, I think we will end it there. You saying your job is perfect.
God damn right. But anyway,
Cool. Thank you, Avery. I'm going to shut the recording off.
go for it.